Mike, I feel like the selection committee is kind of toying with the emotions of both Pac-12 fans and Huskies fans by being like, Washington's in. No, wait, Washington's not in. No, Washington's in at the top 4. How do the fans feel about it?
Yeah, it's really, really frustrating on the West Coast because I think everyone wants to see Alexa consistency with their program. And, Washington has shown that. And not only they want to see consistency from their program, but they also want to see it from the selection committee, who seems to be wavering with certain criteria. And the way things set up for them occasionally, look, everyone's going to hammer them for their non-conference schedule. And I get that. I mean, the non-conference schedule is not great. And yet their overall strength of schedule compares to some of those teams that are in the mix. So to me, it's surprising. And then to hear someone like Kirby Hocutt come out there and say there's a razor thin margin multiple times between 4 and 5 with Michigan and UW is completely perplexing to me. I don't know how many teams in the country could be able to overcome 2 losses in their final 3 weeks, only play 2 games outside of the state, one of them against a Rutgers team that I believe has got 2 wins on the season, and in an Iowa team that they lost to. So to me, it's really mind-boggling that there's such a razor-thin margin. When Hocutt was coming out there and saying that there's a thin margin, I thought he was talking about Clemson, because to me, I think UW's resume is actually better than Clemson's resume right now. Their best win sitting with Louisville. Louisville's got 3 losses. They continue to plummet down the rankings. I actually think the committee has put themselves in an awkward position where you're going to almost now guarantee a spot for an Ohio State team whose resume is fantastic. I don't think there's anyone who can deny that. If you're going to say to me, where does Ohio State belong? Sure, there's an argument that they should be in the top 4. To not even, if I don't see a ding next week for not even playing in their Big Ten championship game, to me, the system seems off. I don't know how a team that doesn't even get to their championship game, and God forbid, the Twitter will explode if Ohio State is going to sit at that 2 spot and Penn State somehow doesn't even make its way into the college football playoff. To me, that's I can't. I mean, I can come up with the scenarios. I just think it's weird that Ohio State's sitting number 2 right now and potentially is going to be number 2 despite Clemson winning out or UW winning out. Who knows? I'm just projecting here, but you're right. The emotional, I don't know if you can hear it in my voice.
Oh, I can hear it. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's upsetting because I really do think if it was a Washington team playing in the South or on the East Coast, we would be having a vastly different conversation. I think because they're a West Coast team, I think that's just the reality of unfortunately what college football has become.
Well, I hear the pain for sure.
I think one of the issues is just as outsiders here from our standpoint, it seems it's like an umpire that has a strike zone that floats around. You just can't figure out what exactly is a strike because they started off talking about strength of schedule, and then they were saying about how conference championships were key. Well, then they put Ohio State in there, who can't play for a conference championship, didn't even win the division, and now that's got to make people like those at Washington or at Clemson, for example, a little uneasy about the situation going into this weekend.
Well, now they're saying it's just the 4 best teams.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
That's what we've been saying all along, but that's
the
not the case. Right.
This whole process.
And that's the problem. It's like, and we've had these conversations before about the NBA MVP, right? It's like, is it the best player on the best team? Is it the guy who's the most talented guy in the league? There's like this ambiguous tone surrounding how to evaluate some of these squads. And to me, that's frustrating because, Kimber, you just made reference to it. It's conference championships mean a big deal. We were on a conference call with Kirby Hocutt, before the selection committee, the week before they started unveiling these rankings. That was a factor. And all of a sudden it's 4 best teams. Well, if it's 4 best teams, why is USC not higher in the rankings? I mean, they continue to rise. And I'm not saying that they belong there in the college football playoff, because I think UW has shown, despite the fact that they lost to SC, UW's body of work, and I keep hearing on Tuesdays when I'm watching the show on ESPN, body of work. Well, what's going to happen next week when the body of work for an Ohio State team, if Penn State wins the Big Ten championship, what's the body of work? They lost to Penn State and they didn't even get to their conference championship game. How they're the number 2 team in the country is mind-boggling. Now, you want to make an argument that they belong in the 4. I think there's a strong case based off of their body of work and their resume. But to sit number 2 as the number 2 team in the country, that plays a factor to me, because you're going to end up drawing, if you're a 4 seed, Alabama down in Atlanta. Now, if you're Washington, you got to go a long way down to Atlanta to play that football game. It's essentially a home game for an Alabama squad. To me, the seeding does become a factor. And I would argue that if Washington wins on Friday night and Clemson wins against Virginia Tech, and I smiled as soon as I saw Virginia Tech in the top 25, because all of a sudden they get now a top 25 win if they go and win that championship game. To me, the resume for Washington is better than Clemson's with that win against Colorado. So to me, if it's Alabama 1, Ohio State number 2, then UW should be number 3, and it shouldn't be Clemson. Clemson should be 4. That razor-thin margin is Colorado's top 10 team, man. Virginia Tech is not. That's a huge win in a championship game for UW.